loneliness is an enduring part of life for children vis-a-vis their parents, parents vis-a-vis their children, the missing of minds, the misunderstandings, the failures of relationships between friends, within families. This is part of life, and it's all going to kind of come with a certain concentration at Christmas. We're not looking for some phony fix at Christmas. We're going to recognize in a unique and somewhat uniquely painful way, we're made for the next life.
Hi, I'm John Cuddeback.
And I'm Sofia Cuddeback.
If you're wondering whether you can really be friends with your spouse
and raise children into responsible adults with whom you have a relationship,
and do what it takes to make a homestead, reconnecting with your body and the land wherever you live.
If you just want to think more about how to make a truly happy home in our trying times,
then The Intentional Household, a LifeCraft podcast, is for you. Join us.
Always honor to have this opportunity to speak with my wife. Today's topic, turning Christmas blues to gold.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just have to say that is a really corny title.
It is. I kind of insisted upon it.
Coming up with titles is actually a little bit tricky.
It is.
You generally do pretty well, but this one is a little bit.
So give me an opportunity at least to explain it. Wait, don't tune out. Yeah, it's better than that corny title sounds. We want to think together about all the many, many challenges of, in certain ways, this most wonderful time of the year and this most challenging time of the year. And of course, those go together precisely because there's a lot of pressure on this time. We have such high expectations. There's so much going on. Almost the more seriously we take Christmas, the more difficult it becomes, the more painful it can be. And I am convinced that that's ultimately part of the plan.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the gift, but we need to recognize that. We need to be intentional about it and stepping back and thinking about how can we kind of lean into the challenges that this holy season is going to be for us. And I think that can make it be much more fruitful.
Yeah, I think so, for sure. And I guess really what I'm thinking when you say that, I love the thought that you're bringing out the fact that Christmas has these issues and difficulties, is just acknowledging that this wonderful time of the year is hard and painful, and for some people more than others. But even for all of us, there's always some little thorn in our side as we're just some pain or sorrow or difficulty. And I like the thought of acknowledging that, so that we don't create an impression of Christmas is that the good Christmas doesn't have any admixture of any sorrow or suffering. That wouldn't really be an expression of a human celebration of a feast.
No.
And so I like acknowledging that.
And we have to note that in this current context, Christmas tends to really get kind of scrubbed and just in all the Hallmark videos and movies about it, and the shows and the specials, and you go shopping. Mm-hmm. Everything is just supposed to be so perfectly just so. And again, funny that speaking to something important. And it's, even if the broader community has lost the deeper meaning, which by and large it seems to have done, there is something not unreasonable about seeking this time to be very special and set apart, and to have us experience it in a unique way. Mm-hmm. So, I think we should go through, give ourselves permission to have the difficulties. Because let's face it, sometimes it's just downright depressing. There's a lot of people for whom this is just the most depressing time of the year. And maybe a little bit of a new approach could help even those people too. So I made myself a list of the problems. I was kind of surprised. I just kind of found myself scribbling on and on. It's not that long, but and you tell me if you want to add anything to it. So, with all due respect to my relatives whom I love, how to handle them it is obviously something that particularly comes up. Then the next thing
Can I interrupt for a second? I just want to clarify. This is not a list of problem areas in Christmas. This is a list of areas that can be a source of suffering. So you're not necessarily saying, like, because when you just said relatives,
I see.
We're not identifying relatives as a problem in Christmas.
Good point.
But we're actually identifying the category of relative as an area from which we experience suffering. It could be relatives not being with us. It's not necessarily a problem, And is that would that, is
Yes,
that fair?
that's, and I often find myself wanting to use, often when I'm trying to title something I'm doing, I find myself wanting to say the challenge of, because in many ways, I think that often is the right word. Things are challenging, that conveys arduous or difficult,
Mhm.
but really all the most important things are arduous.
Right.
This is a very Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas point. The human good is an arduous good. That's why courage is one of the cardinal virtues. Simply to do a good human life well is, even on the natural level, takes the cardinal, the hinge virtue of courage that gives you the power to endure sorrow, to endure suffering without being overcome by it. And sometimes even to have to kind of attack the things that are standing in the way of achieving the good, which is difficult to achieve. So it's this is why this is pertains to the household in general. I think our whole approach here is going to be what our approach to household always is. The gift is deeper, richer, more nuanced, interconnected, wonderfully complex than we've yet realized. That always brings suffering with it, but let's lean into it and recognize that in the suffering is a coming further into the gift.
Yeah, great.
That was a
Perfect.
bit long-winded, but
No,
you're
I think
right.
it's great.
It's not.
I
It's
think
not
you get to
it's not
refocus.
something wrong
Yeah.
necessarily. I mean, sometimes there's something
Yeah,
wrong,
it's challenging, but the good is challenging too.
well said.
So, okay, go back to
All right,
so relatives was number one.
So I mean, the next one I put was kind of loneliness slash people that you simply miss, that you can't be together with, and sometimes that means that they're just away, or certain people you just would like to have a much richer presence to interaction with in your life. In God's great providence, it just isn't going to be so. And you can't. Kind of at this time of year, you maybe feel that more. Failed relationships often will kind of, I think, come through memories. Memories can be sad when they're both good. Often it's very good memories of childhood that are sad, or it's bad memories that are sad and bring back the sadness. So it really tends to be very much a time of memories. And the final one that I had put was a, a failure in having the time together be what you want it to be. Say you arrange a meal, you arrange a party, you arrange a sitting around the fire, you arrange a read aloud. You just kind of misfires. In part, again, you have such kind of high hopes. Hey, come over, we're going to do such and such, and then people get there and they don't really want to do it, or they're not having a good time, and that can be really hard, at least for me. So that's my list. Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would add maybe also feelings of inadequacy. And I don't mean
Put that
just
down.
on the level of arranging material things. There can be, a broader feeling of inadequacy. Again, the expectations are high, not just for material distribution of things, but making an experience. And sometimes we can feel inadequate to meet that expectation.
Mm, I hear you. I think that's a nice one. So where do we begin? Well, I mean, I maybe we can begin with kind of a principle that I already just tried to say, and you can tell me what you think of this, or whether you have a different view or want to add something to that. But I do think, again, it's already to be 50% of the way there to recognize this truth. Christmas, even if objectively Christmas is not as central a Christian feast as Easter, for instance, that still, I think traditionally, the celebration of Christmas, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, in the case where it's kind of associated with winter and cold, that it's just an utterly unique time that many, if not most, I think probably most people just kind of most associate with the good life. If there's any time you want to be happy, it's this time. There's a reason the song says it's the most wonderful time of the year. In general, it's what children most look forward to. And so that we stop and recognize, hey, this is okay. There's a reason that we kind of put, even if we need to temper it. It's okay to recognize there's a reason that there's kind of this pressure, and let's recognize that. But then let's lean into it, kind of sort things out, and say, all right, where do we just need to say, okay, but it's all right if we fail in this way or that we have this problem. But especially that just being willing to endure certain things is going to be part of making this time be a grace. Perhaps like life itself, at its most intense times, it's going to be most difficult. So we kind of have to gird ourselves up and say, okay, but I can do this. And this is where it's going to become more of an opportunity to experience who I am, to develop our relationships, to kind of expand and deepen my whole experience of life. Is that, does that make any sense, dear?
It totally does. And I really, really like what you're saying, but I just am going to just stick my finger in it for 1 second. And I hope I'm not creating too much of a digression, because I really want to get back to this list that you've made.
Good.
But
Good.
I, I actually just want to challenge you a little bit. I actually wonder if that line from the song, "The Most Wonderful Time of the Year," is actually part of the problem. And I just, we love Christmas so much, and we love reading Christmas stories. And it's just interesting for me to kind of look back historically how Christmas was celebrated, et cetera. And also I prepare carols for lessons in carols. And so I just love the tradition of English Christmas carols. So just meditating on the words. What seems to be apparent to me is I'm not sure that Christmas was celebrated with the heft that we invest it with nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is not to say it's not as important as you're saying, John. It is
That's a good point,
incredibly
though.
important. But I wonder, in a different cultural environment, where actually Christmas is a moment in a bigger project, if the days outside of Christmas are part of the unfolding of the whole Christmas story, that is ultimately an invitation, a daily invitation to a relationship with Christ, Christmas is a moment on the way. I just wonder almost if it's become, because of, like you said, it's cold, it's dark, we need to be comforted. I mean, after all, Christmas is set at a time of, during the pagan days, they had I think the 25th is actually the day of, what was the name of their Christmas rite, Carialia or something like that.
I remember. But, when you get right around the
They
solstice,
actually
they did
had
these things.
a winter feast that was centered around light, singing, food. It's like almost like we know we need to be comforted at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I just wonder if maybe we've overinvested, as though Christmas is the one place where you feel comfort, consolation. If you're Christian, adding, Christian focus, blah, blah, blah. Even that, it's like Christmas is supposed to be a moment in a bigger experience. And that if it's the only moment, then it's bound to be laced with failure. You're not going to be able to be present enough. You're not going to be able to savor enough. You're not going to be able to get all the people that you love into, one spot at the same time. It's just like, if it is the most wonderful time of the year, doesn't that kind of set it up for failure? So I'm just wondering if maybe the first step
we need to talk about that.
is to just change the way we think about Christmas. This is not to strip it of its importance, but to realize the importance of Christmas is actually a participation in what happens around Christmas. And if we're living those things correctly, then Christmas becomes a way in which we continue to do that, which we're doing 360
Dear, and that's it. I think this is the key point. I'm very glad that you said that. But this is very Joseph Pieper, the great philosopher, writes on festivity and leisure. One of his key points is festivity is when you stop the other things you're doing, and the basic attitudes and dispositions that are always in play, they're always fundamentally driving and forming your life, come through in a special way at that time. But it is simply a kind of special breaking through of what is always the situation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And this is a profoundly important point about life and about, I think, life in the household. This connects to even, all Sundays should be a little instance of this. Consider this kind of by analogy. If Sunday is just kind of like save me. I mean, just kind of take your, head come up for air out of the water. Otherwise, I'm totally drowning. I mean, the end of Sunday will always be profoundly depressing because it's like the little island in a sea of pain. And exactly. And so the island will always itself then kind of be overwhelmed with pain because it's not enough of a break. I think by analogy, same thing here. If it's like, life itself is just a struggle. And then, and this is, it's the most wonderful time because, now at least set our cares aside and have fun. Note how there can be
meaningful.
A little sense of desperation.
Absolutely.
In the kind of secular celebration here, just like and that's why it leads to excesses, and often then is kind of reduced down to what you're drinking and what you're watching, even the technologies
What
that
you're
you're
getting.
using, because
Yeah.
it's kind of a desperation.
I wonder if that's why depression is kind of the first emotional, kind of negative emotional experience that people kind of latch onto, meaning identify, are able to identify around Christmas. Because, in fact, if that is your experience of Christmas, it's this moment where, in a sea of otherwise life, you get to, have fun, be released from that, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, even if you succeed in that tiny island of Christmas, knowing that you're going back to something so radically different would be very depression inducing.
Totally. Okay. So how about, can we focus for a moment? Just let's take, not everyone are a married couple running a household, but let's just focus on that attitude. And that attitude can apply to anybody in a household, even a household of one. We, how can we craft this time at Christmas? And we have a different podcast celebration that's about
Mm.
kind of trying to craft our whole celebration of Christmas. We're thinking, okay, how can we make this a special time? We have to be careful, particularly if we're thinking about the children. Of course, it's natural. We want to give the children as wonderful a time as we can. We want them to experience this in a rich way. But I think here, just already what we've just said, what's kind of coming out in this discussion, I think is already, we need to be careful to be conveying to them. The whole point here is we want to be kind of pausing and bringing out what we hope we're giving to you and doing together
All
all
the
the time
time.
in our
Yeah.
life together. And this says a lot about a household. In many ways, how about this? Here's a cool angle into what good household life is like. Christmas is just a particularly concentrated expression of good
Mhm.
household
Mhm.
life
Mhm.
all the time.
Yeah.
And
The perfect description of that is the Cratchits.
good
They
point.
sit around that
In
table,
a
and they
Christmas
do have
Carol,
something a little bit more. They do have the turkey, which they don't normally have. They do have the drink, which they normally don't have, but they're drinking out of the same broken cups, and they share them and pass around. But what you experience is that they're experiencing the love for one another, and the kind of expression that they have daily is kind of focused and concentrated and brought to a head and allowed to overflow at the Christmas table. But it's not different from what their daily life is.
well, then to some extent, that's beautiful. Um, Nothing like building using Dickens' A Christmas Carol to help think about this.
Yeah.
Didn't we do a podcast on that last year too? I mean, you love that story so much. Um, so again, it's an opportunity here. The things that get us down, it's almost like maybe that this list that we've just said here are
Totally.
kind of the life list of things that we need to be aware of
Or that we
and
have
be
issues and need to get straight in our life outside of Christmas
in general. And let's
during this.
not
Yeah.
put the burden on Christmas to have to get
Yeah.
these things straight. But is this part of the gift of Christmas that we do look at these things and say, okay, how can we make a little bit of an effort here? Kind of, so relatives.
Kind of to say, I just love that approach because it's a different way of looking at this list that you've made. The difficulties actually become the opportunity. If it weren't difficult, you wouldn't know to look to that area of your life otherwise. But given that these things come up as difficulties at Christmas time, rather than seeing
Mhm,
as a kind of
mhm.
something that drags our Christmas down, think of it as, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful this has come out on Christmas because it's giving me a little road sign about the things that are important that I actually need to focus in other places in my life.
Excellent way of putting it. And then we're also going to have an opportunity now. Well, you might say, maybe a little trite, to have the Christmas spirit. Well, it's not trite; it's very true. And be generous, be other centered. So avoid what will never work, namely a kind of selfish approach of, I'm just going to do whatever it takes to kind of have this be the most wonderful time of the year for
Mm.
us, me as an individual, or we as a family. We're just going to kind of put ourselves first and do what we most want. It is a time where we have to think about relatives. Now, sometimes that's a great source of joy, but other times there might be relatives that, well, we didn't so much maybe want to have to spend this time with. But is that part of the gift of life, of human life, that we have these people that, even with all the baggage and suffering that can go with it, are part of God's important part of God's great plan for us. And here at Christmas, that we admit, yeah, the type of spirit parents can pass on to children. If there is this aspect there, well, we wouldn't have wanted to do such as, why do we have to go over there? Why do we have to spend time doing this versus that? Because this is what we do. This is who we are. And at Christmas, we stop and we especially make an effort. And the efforts that we make there can bear fruit beyond Christmas.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think about relatives and kind of in the context of what we just said prior to about using these difficulties as a road sign of things to work on. It's not just about, oh, well, you wouldn't have a problem if the rest of your life were properly ordered, then you wouldn't have a problem with relative X, Y, or Z. Sometimes there are just, it's an objective suffering that
Hmm.
is, you're not really in a place to change. But I wonder if how we bear the suffering actually changes the nature of the suffering
Good
and makes
point.
it more bearable. Because there are issues with relationships, not just relatives, but other relationships that are outside of your control. And actually, every single one of the things you put on the list can have that aspect that you're in a situation that you can't control. But I'm going to ask you to just go put your philosopher hat back on, specifically your philosopher bow tie or whatever. We've
Mhm.
been talking in a different context about, you've been reading Boethius and St. Augustine. Something you said just recently in a conversation really struck me, how both Boethius in his Consolation of Philosophy and St. Augustine say, the will, your will is the thing that matters because that's what you have control over. Things that are outside of you can't control, but our will can change how we suffer those things. And that makes
Mhm,
all the
mhm,
difference.
mhm.
And I think, when you say, if there's a difficult situation that you can't really get around and your child's like, well, why do we have to blah, blah, blah? What you're patterning for them is because I'm going to receive this difficulty and bear it in a certain kind of way. And how I choose to bear it can transform me. So that we suffer well actually transforms us. It's not like, oh, well, you did a good job and you did the right thing. It actually makes us be most human because that's only humans are capable of that. Taking something that's objectively a suffering,
Mhm.
and by choosing to suffer it well, it actually makes us bigger.
I think that's very true, and it's not like it's magic. It's not like it makes a complete transformation overnight, but if I, it seems a very simple and obvious point, but maybe it applies very much now. And it's something we can pattern for anyone else in our Christmas situation. We're not going to go into the aspects of our Christmas celebration that we're not as excited about. We're going to choose to go into with that good attitude and say, this is part of the gift. This is part of who I am.
Mm.
My interaction with these people, my serving these people, whatever it is, and especially if it's something that we don't feel like doing, it can be a great opportunity to just say, okay, but I might not be able to I can't choose to like it,
Mhm.
but I can choose to approach it with a good
To
attitude.
suffer it well. Yeah. And so a good attitude does not mean pretending it's not there. It doesn't mean
No, exactly,
whitewashing.
exactly.
It
Good.
means to suffer it well, to choose to suffer it in a way that actually makes us greater.
And sometimes it might even be fitting then if our children, for instance, say, well, why do we have to such and such? It might be, according to prudential discernment, opportunity to say, you know what, son, Daddy's actually not that thrilled about having to do such and such either. Daddy might prefer to do such and such, but we do this too, because this is who we are. We stand in relation to these people. And it could even be about certain aspects, even sometimes of the prayer or for the liturgy is going to be very long, just think things like that. We don't have to pretend as though this is exactly what we would have chosen, but we're going to prioritize this because this is an expression of our basic principles. And this time of year, they come out in a particularly concentrated form. There's a reason this is a time for relating to relatives and friends in a certain kind of way. So let's, according to prudential discernment, embrace that.
Mhm. And that makes all the difference.
How about just the aspect of we're missing people and we're lonely. It's obviously going to apply to different people more in different times in their life. Do you have any quick thought on that?
I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is it's very painful to even kind of empathetically put yourself in that situation of just experiencing. Some people have extreme loneliness, and we all have loneliness to a certain degree because we have people we love who've passed on who aren't here or people that we're close to that live somewhere where we can't be with them together. But there are some people who experience really profound loneliness at a time when your expectation is to be together with people. Um, I think, first of all, that it's not about minimizing the loneliness. Maybe the first step is to acknowledge and suffer it. And that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't try to
Sure.
minimize it. But I think the first thing, it's very, very important to acknowledge it, and that I have a real suffering here. And in a certain sense, it becomes part of your offering at Christmas. I have this suffering that, frankly, only our Lord and our Lady can really understand. Others who completely understand. There are others who might have a similar situation that understand that with you. But there is an incredible gift. And maybe that very experience of loneliness is actually the invitation that those who don't experience that loneliness don't get, which is to actually enter into what was probably a terrible loneliness on the part of Christ. Imagine him coming and calling those he loved, and so many people, even those who were closest to him, just not getting it, or only getting it to a certain extent. So first, to acknowledge and maybe be open to suffering it well, and not just try to whitewash over it or cover it up. And then certainly seeing that it's something that you share in common with our Lord and our Lady is a way of being together with someone. You're not alone then, if you are willing to think about that and rest into that comfort that you can offer by being in it with our Lord and our Lady.
Well, I like how you're just kind of going really big there. You just kind of going to the top of kind of, loneliness is a normal part of human life. We are made for deep communion, and any way you slice it, we're going to experience loneliness in this life, and this is this is our ultimate home. And maybe this I think we can broaden that out and apply that to Christmas celebration in general. Again, we don't want to put over expectation, overburden it, but I think this is a real part of our experience, that we have high expectations for Christmas because in some sense it's where life becomes most concentrated, and the sufferings and joys that are kind of always there come out in a particular way here. And maybe at Christmas, it is going to be a particular experience of, we're not made for this earth. Even in a very happy household, there's suffering. There's a kind of aspect of longing. There's a sense of, we're made for more. This is never going to be permanent here on this earth. There are always some among us that we so badly would have wanted to have here with us right now who are not. Even in the most kind of looking out the window, looking in at the fireside and the warm light and the wonderful smiles that happen. There's always that kind of hole in the heart. Our hearts are restless until they rest in thee, St. Augustine kind of thing. And so I think I like your approach of again, loneliness to some extent is an enduring part of life. We all know, even for those who are married, for children vis-a-vis their parents, parents vis-a-vis their children, the missing of minds, the misunderstandings that have, the failures of relationships between friends, within families, between the fallouts between relatives, to connect back to the other. This is part of life, and it's all going to kind of come with a certain concentration at Christmas. Okay, is this an opportunity to say, to kind of reaffirm, to step up and say, this is okay in my life, that this is the case. We're not looking for some phony fix at Christmas. At Christmas, we're going to recognize, maybe again in a unique and somewhat uniquely painful way, we're made for the next life. We're made for something more. Which makes us lean more deeply, most of all, into our primary relationship with the Lord, and appreciating and cultivating the human relationships that are given to us, even while they themselves retain brokenness within them. And there's some that are so broken we can't do anything about, or there's some that are just simply remote from us in place. Reminds us of the great life to which we are called, that we can't have yet. And that's salutary. That's good. That's part of who we are. That's what our faith is about.
Just want to go back to what you said. I think everything you said there is exactly the answer. That's kind of the answer that Hilaire Belloc comes up with in his essay, A Remaining Christmas, which is so profound. You said, it's okay. And I just, we use that. You use that phrase a lot when we're talking about hard things. And I'm always like, no, it's not okay. And I think, I just want to clarify what you mean when you say that's okay is saying okay in the sense is not acquiescing or accepting it, saying, oh, this is how it is. Everything's fine in the sense of everything is as it ought to be. When you say, I think part of the difficulty is when you have a pain, something like loneliness, it feels like such a falling away from the way things ought to be that it feels like a terminus, like this is how it is. And that's the agony is contained in that. No,
Yeah.
we're made for more. We're
Or you can
screaming out
amputate
against
it.
it,
It's like you're
right?
missing a limb.
Right. And it's not okay. I think when you say it's okay, what you mean is accepting it as part of a human condition that is on the way to
Yes,
something
that is
better.
what I mean. Thank you.
And that is very, very important. And I think that's what you kind of encapsulated when you said it it actually shows us that it hurts as much as it does, shows us that we're made for something more.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we can't stop in our loneliness. We can't say it's okay in the sense of that's what life is like. There's nothing else. Here we are. Make your peace with it and just stop. That's not the okay you're talking about. The okay you're
Right.
talking about is don't worry that pain is not a sign to you of what life is all about. Life is actually about something more. And the pain is something that you can go through ultimately to something that is more.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. So this isn't supposed to be a just deep discussion of suffering. This is obviously central. Christmas is the most wonderful time in many ways. Maybe it's a time of unique blessing because, again, everything becomes a little more concentrated. But life itself is wonderful. It's very challenging. Christianity makes no bones of, in many ways, it's about taking up a yoke that ultimately is light,
Mhm.
but it also is
A yoke.
heavy
Yeah.
in a sense, right?
Yeah.
It's lightened by love, but it's lightened by love in its very heaviness, as it were. And let's remind ourselves of that at this time of year.
Mhm.
Let's recognize again that's part of the gift. But hey, by the way, also just mentioning this loneliness thing, that's a good reason for us all, particularly those of us who are in a situation where we're not so much the ones who are lonely, or even if we have our own lonelinesses, this is the time of year to reach out to others and help them not be so lonely.
Yes, I
Just
agree.
kind of get outside ourselves
Mhm.
and go and visit people
And invite to your
invite
table.
the people to the table and visit the that homebound person, the elderly, or
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I did want to also acknowledge that while all of these things are important, and even if you're experiencing extreme loneliness, to keep these principles in mind does make a difference. But I think there are things that one can do to help prevent this kind of cascading, snowballing experience of loneliness. I would just recommend looking outward and being with other people, making the effort to not let your loneliness drive you in to be alone, but you're going to have to make the effort to go out and be with other people, actually attending church services and liturgies at Christmas time is a really good way to not be alone. It's a place that everyone is welcome, everyone can come. And it is important if you're bodily alone, it will make your psychological and emotional experience of being alone much more intense. So making the effort to go out. And then also, if you are the lonely person, to turn your gaze outward to help other people will help you in your loneliness. Or, in other words, keep it from becoming this completely insupportable thing. Or if it becomes insupportable for you, to reach out to others and say, I'm really struggling. This is serious. I'm feeling
amen.
so lonely and I can't do anything
We should
about
look
it.
for help there. And another thing that we're saying about have a good attitude, and this is
Yes.
part of the gift, means that we shouldn't seek help when we need it, offer help, anticipate people
Yeah.
in offering help, recognizing that that might be what helps them come to this better attitude. Tell me about the feelings of inadequacy.
The reason that came to my mind is, of course, as the wife and mother in the household, for me, it's a particular delight in creating an environment in which people experience the joy of Christmas, togetherness. A lot of that practical burden falls on me. I actually take a ton of that burden on myself. Sometimes the children are like, please, mommy, don't do that. We'd rather you just be happy. So anyway, I can sometimes overly take that burden on myself. But apart from that, which sounds like kind of an obvious understanding of feeling inadequate, what struck me is we live in such a materialist culture surrounding Christmas, and gifts are such a big part of that I think sometimes it can be very real that people feel inadequate because they don't have the monetary power to provide a Christmas that looks and has the wow factor that is often what's kind of celebrated. And I think that's a really big deal. It's an unfortunate thing that the monetary question has become such an enmeshed part of the Christmas experience because there are definitely people who don't have the money to produce that kind of an experience. And so people can often feel inadequate, I think, because they can't buy the gift that actually expresses how they feel about someone, or they can't give someone the joy of, oh my goodness, this is so amazing, that a monetarily expensive gift would. And I think that's very, very depressing because it actually points to a bigger life situation for it kind of, if someone doesn't have a lot of money, chances are pretty good that that's a pain point in other areas of their life throughout the
Mm-hmm.
year.
Mm-hmm.
And Christmas is like the other things that we talked about, a place where that becomes very focused and kind of pinpointed, that financial limitations make it hard for you to be able to enter into what is actually promoted as the happiest time of the year.
Well, that's not what I was expecting you to say, but I'm glad that you did. I'm going to draw you out on another aspect in a moment, but I'm glad you pointed that one. That certainly is real, and just recognizing already is, I think, very helpful. But just as regards a solution, I mean, it is the solution that just fundamentally, hey, this is an opportunity to have to recognize, um, we have to recommit ourselves to what the point of Christmas is. And we have to embrace our financial situation. And we're not trying to pretend. And the good news is we don't need to pretend because it might sound like, well, this is just very convenient. We're going to say, well, the real spirit of Christmas is this, as though it's just because I happen to not have the money or something.
Mm-hmm.
But no, actually, it those who don't have the financial resources to do certain things actually might be precisely prompted. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to do it, because again, anyone can be bad, have the wrong attitude,
Right.
whether poor or rich,
Absolutely.
right? But it makes us wonder again, what is the real quote spirit of Christmas?
Mm-hmm.
What is this fundamentally about? A certain generosity that brings us together by looking to others. Giving gifts is, we just had a separate conversation on rethinking gift giving at Christmas, right? And it is an expression at this time of year in a special way of how our relationship is so primary. We rejoice in the Lord. We're giving gifts to rejoice together that the Lord has come, right? So those obviously can be done in simple ways, things that we make or things that don't cost very much. So it gives us an opportunity. It's a gift. That challenge, that kind of quote problem in the financial gives us an opportunity. That's kind of an obvious point. It's good to remind ourselves of that.
Can I just paint a little description of what I would see as being a solution
Please.
to this problem? I just picture myself in a financial situation where I can't give gifts the way is being advertised. And so I have to resort to, but I want to give something. And it's appropriate. It is a real expression. And it is the time where we express our love or affection for people by giving them something. Not the what, it's actually the giving that's important. So you want to give something. So let's say I'm making things, and of course, crafting things can be ridiculously expensive. So, it's something that's a little bit humble. Doesn't have that flashiness. I picture that when I give that to the person that I have made it for, I'm experiencing a conflux of emotions that would include things like, I'm embarrassed it's small. I wish it could be more. I'm frustrated because I feel like it was more in keeping with how I feel about the person I'm giving this. So there's this whole welter of competing emotions interiorly, but of course I want to give it to them. That in the giving of the gift to them, that my giving it to them not be accompanied with, I'm sorry, this is so small. I really wanted to give you something more. I really couldn't get anything else. Like those are all words that we might use to kind of band-aid or help address the feelings that we're having inside that are hard. And I feel like the better remedy would be to give the gift with the spirit that the gift actually is. I'm giving this to you because I love you and you mean something to me. And I know your response might be, oh, that was kind of disappointing. And that's okay. I'm going to soldier through that and be true to what is in fact the case. I'm giving this to you because I love you. And I wanted to show you that I'm thinking of you at this time. It's hard to stay in that experience when you're frustrated, humiliated, want to exonerate yourself, defending yourself interiorly. And we can't control how the person receives it. They might not receive it as such. But let's say you have to do that over and over again. and that your spirit was, I love you. And after you're done opening my gift, then, I say, can I bring you some cookies? Or, oh, would you? And my spirit continues to express, I'm happy you're here. It's a blessing that we're together. Then the reality behind the gift becomes more real for the person. And maybe it would be something that over time you exercise that. So maybe it's like you're actually exercising the reason for the season. That maybe it's easier to kind of not do the muscle lifting, the moral weightlifting, when you can just buy, a gift that
That's a
wows
great point.
people.
I think that's an absolutely great point. I'm gonna pivot then to what I think even you're saying that brings out that there's another aspect where people are going to feel adequate, and I think the reality is that sometimes people looking at someone like you who have kind of a gift for making a celebration be special, making the house be warm, etc. I think this could be a worse feeling of inadequacy. You may have all the financial resources in the world to give whatever gifts or decorate in whatever way, but it's hard to make the home have the warmth, the celebration have the warmth that they want to have. And I mean, talk about a feeling in inadequacy. And I think this is very important for all of us to recognize. I mean, this connects to the deeper product thing in the home. Very often, there's the challenge of I'll hear young mothers say, "Well, you talk about femininity and the feminine genius and being able to make the warm home." And so many women say, "I didn't really have that pattern for me. I don't really feel that in myself," and they feel very inadequate in that.
Mhm.
And I don't want to get sidetracked. I think we should be closing here, but I think this is a a really beautiful opportunity to remind ourselves that wherever you are, this Christmas is an opportunity to kind of go move the needle a little bit, go in the direction that we're trying to go in our home in general.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is something we're struggling with in our home. Your every home is going to be a little bit different. You're still trying to discover that in yourself. I don't think you were just saying there, dear, have confidence in the gift you're giving and give it. I'd say the exact same thing about this. Have confidence in the way the meal that you're making, the way that you're arranging your home, the way the thing that you do when you invite people over. Do your best to give them your heart. I know from personal experience that it can be very hard to have things in your heart that you want to express, that you don't feel as though you have the established habits of being able to embody and express the way that you want to. And this can make you feel very inadequate as regards very big things in life. And there, I think it is again, key moment wherever we are. It's part of God's story for us. It's a great gift if we recognize, I want to be more generous. I want to be more warm. I want to be able to make people really feel that they belong here. Just choosing that and wanting that and doing our best to go in that direction is going to bear fruit wherever we are. And it doesn't matter how we compare to what goes on in other people's homes.
Mhm. I think that's really the most important part of the message. Well, the most important half of the message. I feel like there's one other thing that I would say
What
before we
is that?
close, and it's something that you actually mentioned when we were talking about loneliness. You said, be aware that there are people who are lonely, invite them into your home, et cetera, et cetera. I wonder if the other side of this experience of inadequacy is, or in this whole conversation, is that each of us should realize that we're all coming in together, possibly experiencing those things. And whether you're experiencing them or not, you should be asking yourself, what can I do to help mitigate that person's experience of loneliness, inadequacy, sadness, like whatever the experience is. And so, especially in the area of inadequacy, um, when I drew that picture of myself giving a small homemade gift to somebody, for obviously I can't control how they receive it, but let's just switch to the other side. That for me is the receiver receiving a homemade gift from someone who's trying to give themselves in the gift, that I would be extra attentive to the fact that person is giving themselves to me in this gift. And therefore, I don't be disappointed. But I actually go, thank you for the gift, or if you're in a household and the mother is making everything lovely to her best ability, et cetera, that we make the effort to say, thank you for this, or wow, you've made the home so lovely. So there are two sides. We're talking about the person
Mm,
who's experiencing all these difficulties, and then the other person is the person who's able to enter into that by changing the person's experience by being grateful. Isn't Christmas ultimately at the heart of Christmas is a gift, is God giving himself to us. And the gift implies a thank you. And so maybe the answer to all of these difficulties or troubles is to see oneself as being a gift and then making the effort to receive others as a gift. And the things that they do, the circumstance, of course, first our Lord coming, but it's both. It's the giving, and then we also get to be the active receiver. And that, I think, makes a really big difference in all of these circumstances of difficulty.
I absolutely agree. And in the end, it's fundamentally about being together in richer ways. And at Christmas, the Lord came to be with us in a very rich way. And he'll be with us in all of these struggles, and he'll help us. And by his grace, we can grow through them and receive all the more the gift he intended for us. Thanks so much for this conversation, Dan.
We pray for everyone to have that gift.
Amen.
Thanks for tuning in this episode of The Intentional Household. If you've enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and leave a rating or review. If you have any topic requests, please send them to lifecraftgroup@gmail.com. For our Wednesday reflections, free courses, reading groups, and live events, please visit life-craft.org.